afternoon or good evening from wherever you may be joining us. I'm Avi Stamen, CEO of Academic Language Experts, and we're delighted to have you here today for our 15th publication success interview. During these interviews, for those who aren't familiar or who haven't been here before, I am very lucky that I have the opportunity to engage in conversation with innovative thought leaders in the world of academia about how they're influencing the world of academics in the hopes of really building a bridge and a better understanding between authors and publishers. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by two wonderful guests. The first is Dominique De Roo, Vice President of Marketing at Brill, and secondly by Tomer Persico, who's a published academic with a social media following of over 35,000 people and the academic director at an organization called Kolot. Dominique has worked in academic publishing for over 15 years in various marketing and sales roles, and currently manages the global marketing team at Brill as the Vice President of Marketing. Before joining Brill, she worked in the communication department at Leiden University. She studied book and digital media studies at Leiden University as well. Tomer serves as the academic director at Kolot and is a member of the senior management team. And he's also a research fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute in Israel. Between 2018 and 2021, he was the Court visiting assistant professor at UC Berkeley Institute for Jewish Law and Israel Studies, a senior research scholar at the UC Berkeley Center for Middle Eastern Studies. And his fields of expertise include contemporary spirituality, Jewish modern identity, Jewish renewal, and the forms of secularization and religiosity in Israel. His first book, The Jewish Meditative Tradition in Hebrew, was published by Tel Aviv University Press, and his second book, In God's Image, The Making of Modern West, was published by Yediot. And really the reason we have him on here is because in addition to being a wonderful scholar, he also has a very strong and may I say influential presence online in the digital sphere as well, and we're going to be talking to him about that. Before we begin, I just want to take one moment to share a word about Academic Language Experts, the company that I run. Academic Language Experts, or ALE for short, provides customized translation, editing, grant writing, indexing, and all types of publication support services to researchers, scientists, and other professionals to help them produce publication-ready texts at the highest levels. We also assist scholars who are looking for help with their book proposals prior to submission to help them submit their proposal to their dream publisher and hopefully get accepted. So really, please don't hesitate and be in touch with myself or any of my colleagues after the interview if you do have any questions or would like to learn more about what it is that we do. We're grateful and proud to have helped scholars translate, edit, and prepare their research in over 50 languages. Articles and books we have worked on are published with top academic publishers, including, of course, Brill. It's our mission to help our authors achieve publication success and be a source of guidance and support throughout their journey. And now, without further ado, I want to introduce you to Dominique and Tomer. So Dominique and Tomer, thank you so much for joining me today, and looking forward to getting to hear from some of your insights.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. So Dominique, let's start with you. And maybe you could, currently you're Vice President of Marketing at Brill. But I'm curious, maybe you could take us back a little bit into the process about how you became a marketing professional, specifically in the world of academic research. Was this intentional, or did it kind of happen by mistake? And had you spent time researching or in the world of academic publication prior to this role, or were you sort of a marketer that had to learn the academic market as you went along?
Yeah, so I was studying at Leiden University. I studied book and digital media studies. And if you're studying that, there are basically two directions in which most people go. You either become a librarian or you end up in academic publishing. Those are really the two main areas where a lot of the alumni end up in. And my first experience with academic publishing was during those years when we had to create a book on our own and publish it on our own. So that was my first experience with academic publishing. And in that project, which we ran with 5 students, I took on the marketing side. And I really liked that. It was really, of course, a student's project. So looking back on it, we made loads of mistakes, but it was an interesting introduction to the whole concept of academic publishing. And after, while I was studying, I also worked at Leiden University in the communications department. So I already had some experience with promotion and PR, and really liked that a lot. And then one day, someone who was an alumna at that same study was working at Brill, and she contacted me to say that there was an opening at Brill for a marketing assistant, and she thought that would be something that would really be right up my alley. So I applied for that and got a job, and that's how I started at Brill. And I started out as a marketing assistant, doing all sorts of different things within the marketing department, and then became a marketing manager for several years, and I've really covered a range of subject areas. Brill is really strong in the humanities, so I've worked on religious studies and Jewish studies, areas like that, but also history, Middle East and Islamic studies, but also international law. So really a range of different subjects. And then after a while, I moved to sales and became a sales manager for different regions for several years. And then at one point, the head of marketing at the time left. And yeah, that left an opening for a new person to take on that role. And I've been doing that for the last couple of years.
Great. And can you tell us a little bit, can you take us behind the scenes a little bit into what does a director of marketing at an academic publisher do? Is most of your time spent focusing on authors and building up lists? Are you speaking a lot to libraries and getting them to sign contracts to purchase Brill books? Are you working with universities? I imagine that it's multifaceted and probably you wear different hats on different days, but maybe you could just tell us a little bit about how you see your position and kind of how you interact with the academic world.
Yeah, so the way that we've set up marketing at Brill is we have 4 different teams. We have a content marketing team, and that's really the area of our marketing that works very closely with our publishing department and with the authors and researchers. And that team is really trying to do storytelling about the research we publish. And in everything that we do, we're trying to tell why is this research relevant, what is its impact, and really trying to bring that to a broader audience. And that can be through podcasts or through blog items or through videos. So really a range of things like that, but also newsletters and emails. And then there's another marketing team, which is called regional marketing. And they focus much more on what is a specific need for this region, because we're a global company, we work worldwide, and you can imagine that in order to reach audiences in China, that's quite different from trying to reach an audience in Israel or somewhere else. So for example, for China specifically, we have a WeChat channel because that's the key medium there, and you have to be active there. So we really look at what does a different region need. And that's also a team that works really closely with librarians and with universities to also talk about, okay, so you have these resources, how can we help you to bring them to the attention of the users and the patrons, and do, for example, trainings at universities and help researchers to use those tools in a good way. Then there's also a web marketing team that's really focused on our website, but also on social media and covering things from that angle. And there's a marketing services team that's in charge of conferences. Of course, we all go to academic conferences. It's really important for us as publishers to be there as well and to present our publications there, but also the reviews part of publishing. So making sure that all of our publications are reviewed and that those reviews are shared, and also they also create print materials like catalogs and flyers and things like that. So that's the way that we've set it up.
Wow, fantastic! Yes, it sounds like a lot of moving pieces, but all really important and critical. And I like the fact that you're thinking beyond the walls of the academic walls and trying to make an impact beyond. So on that note, Tomer, maybe you could tell us just a little bit about yourself, but specifically I know you've got, your academic pursuits, but then you've got this sort of, I don't know whether you'd call it a hobby or a full-time job, but actually managing, your own following on social media, which now numbers over 35,000. And I'm curious, maybe you could tell us a little bit about how that came to be. Was this kind of a fluke and happened to, by mistake, or
Yeah.
or when you first started out, did you say, I see social media as a way to, influence and to share my ideas, and I want to kind of, like consciously build up a following over time?
Yeah, so I mean, if trying to choose between a hobby and a job, let's call it a vocation, and that already answers a bit of your question. It was certainly intentional, though. Specifically, I came into Facebook, an account in Facebook and Twitter, not purposely to do something there. I was a high school teacher, let's say, if to take an example of my Facebook account, and one of my students opened a fake account for me, and so I decided that I had to have a real one there. But I did have online presence even before that. I had a blog for a lot of years. It was pretty successful. It still is, I would say, the biggest blog in Hebrew about religion and spirituality. And when Facebook came and later Twitter came, I used those platforms first of all as instruments to enhance my blog posts to reach more people. But then, of course, they took on a life of their own, and I became a Facebook persona and then a Twitter persona. And to get more to your point, certainly I see these platforms and others, my whole online persona, as something that is very much connected to my work, to my research. I always thought that academia can't remain in the so-called ivory tower, that it has to engage with the public. I always thought that whatever I study has to be presented and accessible to as many people as possible, or else, I mean, I never understood the whole concept of writing an academic article which would be read by 20 people and that's it, and become a line in my CV. So certainly all my public presence is totally intentional, and if something happened is that it did not remain only as a way of presenting studies of mine and learned assessments of subjects that I know from academia that are now in the news. It became also a place where I share my opinions about politics, etc. So that was the let's say development of what happened there.
Got it. And so I'm curious whether it, based on what you're saying, whether it went through an evolution in terms of the development of your thought when you go to post something. Meaning, if you've already written a blog, I imagine that you've probably thought through the idea, have shared it maybe with some people privately, and then posted something, as opposed to maybe a tweet or a Facebook post where even I'm sure those. So maybe you could walk us through how much time, energy, effort, or what sort of triggers a post, and how many renditions or editions, or how much feedback are you getting on that before you decide to post it? Obviously, once you post it, then it triggers a whole new conversation. But I'm curious what that process looks like.
Yeah. I mean, let's get straight to the point. It takes time. It takes time and effort, and this time is on the expense of other things, right? Had I not had a blog, maybe 2, 3, 5, 10 more academic articles will be on my name in different academic journals, and I have to, acknowledge it and consider it and decide that this is indeed what I want to do, and this is something that it's worthwhile for me to do. And it's also an important thing to acknowledge that there are certainly, as you said, it's just different genres of writing and different genres of corresponding and communicating with the public. A blog, Facebook and Twitter are also different. They're different in the way that you write. They're different in the audience that views whatever you write. I can write the same thing in a short Facebook post or a Twitter tweet, and it gets totally different responses because it's just different audiences. So yes, it's something that you learn, along the way. But then you get into consideration of what comes at what's expense inside all these three, or LinkedIn, whatever, because there's no doubt also that Facebook has taken a lot of the effort that I used to put in my blog is now put in Facebook or even in Twitter, and everything has its own price and trade-offs. Right.
Got it. I just want to remind everyone quickly that if you do have questions as sort of Tomer or Dominique are speaking and you do want to ask, feel free to jot them down in the chat. Usually we get to the question and answer session at the end, but if it's something that's very relevant, we can try and slip it in during as well. So Dominique, I want to kind of throw this back to you because what's interesting here is kind of, I think, Tomer, maybe it's to an extreme, but understands the importance and role of the scholar in their, in the proliferation or in the dissemination of their own research, or maybe even, sort of, initial thoughts about a topic before it even becomes a research. But I'm curious from your perspective, how Brill looks at the relationship between the publisher and the author in terms of getting their work out there. So obviously you're coming in at a point where someone has published an article or they published a book with you, and then it's time to say, okay, that's lovely that that we've done this. Now, who bears the burden of responsibility of actually creating dialogue and conversation about it, or what are, and has that sort of evolved and developed over time?
Yeah, I think, of course, many academics will rightfully expect their academic publisher to play a role in the distribution of their work, and that's the foundation of our job as a marketing and sales department, to make sure that we do that. And I just explained a little bit on the different ways in which we do that, through social media, through blogs, through campaigns. So of course we have a large role to play there. But at the same time, we see that we can also strengthen each other, and the campaigns that are really successful and the research where we see the most uptake and the most impact are quite often campaigns where the author, his or herself, also play a role in leveraging their network and are also active. Because as an academic, you are in the middle of your network of peers that are all involved in the same research area. You have the channels that other people are also following, and that's very interesting for other academics to connect to. So we see that if we play our role in sending out information around new publications, but authors also do that themselves, then that really has a great effect to strengthen each other. And we also really try to help our authors to learn how to do that, and to provide tools on how to be able to do that. One of the tools that we have for that is called Kudos. It's a company that we work with. If you publish an article with us, you get an invitation to take part in that, and they help our authors and academics to create plain language summaries of their research, to really engage with, okay, so this is a different audience that I'm trying to reach out there. So how do I explain what my research is about? And how can I reword that for a different audience? And then how can I share that across different networks? Which channels are important? And then afterwards also track that and see how does that then move in those networks. That's one area where we try to help authors in that way. And we see that works really well.
And in terms of, I think that maybe one of the challenges that scholars face is kind of like Tomer said, you've got the blog, you've got Twitter, you've got Facebook. You could do, there are a lot of academics that I engage with on LinkedIn. You can be a YouTuber. It's sort of endless, in terms of the possibilities that are out there. So I guess this question is for both of you, but let's start with you, Dominique, is is there a way that you can recommend to scholars of how to sort of navigate for themselves where they want to start? Because in my from speaking with scholars, I think that sometimes just the sheer quantity or options on the menu can overwhelm and actually prevent people from taking that first step, which is putting up a post or writing a blog or whatever it may be. So yeah, any tips about that?
I think one thing that helps is really look at where your peers are in your area, and that what are you following? What do you find interesting channels to see what's going on in my area of expertise? That's a really good place to start. It really differs per subject area, and we see some subject areas that have their own channels that are much more important. And for example, if you look at linguistics, there's something called Linguist List, which basically everyone who does anything in linguistics, they all follow that. So that's the place to be. If you're specializing in that area. And so each subject area, they all have their own niches that which are really important to share. In some areas, listservs are really important. In others, there is a Twitter account that everyone follows or a blog. So really look at what do you follow and where do you see your direct peers, and then try to use that as a starting point.
Right. Tomer?
I think Dominique is referring here to activities that you do after the book or right before the book is published. And I would like to, to say that, I mean, if at all possible, and certainly I see that it's not always possible or, feasible for people, but it is very beneficial to have your infrastructure in place before you actually publish the book and you go on a marketing tour. If you have for a year or two or more already a Facebook page, a Twitter account, LinkedIn, YouTube, you already have what you need to make an impact straight off, right? For yourself, you don't have to ask for favors, as it were, to go to another podcast or blog or have an interview here or there. You yourself are, advertising your work. And now again, I understand it's not always possible because, as I said before, it demands time, it demands effort, and it also demands a certain sense of marketing when preparing, your online persona, right? You can't just, publish nonsense on Twitter or your family's experience in your holiday trip to wherever, and then, say, oh, a book of mine is out, take a look. It doesn't work as effectively, obviously, as if you build up some sort of persona as an intellectual, a specialist in a certain area, etc. And then after I had researched the subject for a few years, here is my book, etc. Right? So it again, and we can talk about this more. I think it's really important to have this in place well before the book is out.
Yeah, no, I think that's really helpful advice, and I think that you're right that it's about creating, engaging content, but it's also about actively engaging with others, right? Meaning it's not enough to just put up a post. I see this a lot where people will put up a post and be surprised when there's crickets, and it really requires the time to sort of engage in an intelligent way with others who may have put out books themselves, or maybe lecturing themselves, or maybe doing none of those things, but just are intelligent and thoughtful people who are giving thought to the world around them. And that itself. Yeah, please.
I'd say another thing. I mean, we are today already immersed in a culture of advertising and sales and even propaganda. People are, as it were, inoculated and even, have developed some antagonism towards this. So there's a certain amount of self-service or self-serving publication, right, of selling yourself that you can do before it gets irritating or people simply switch off, right? if your Facebook page is all about, recycling the same ad for your book, it has no effect after the second or third time. It's just people just ignore it. And so also there's a fine balance to be struck between general posts about intellectual stuff and opinions, etc., and then advertising your specific book or project, right? And yeah, and it takes some training, I would say.
Yeah, but I do want to push back to my original question, Tomer, and that is, how did you make the determination about the specific platforms that you chose? Or maybe if you were to start from scratch today, how would you go about, so one thing is looking around and saying where are people at, right? That's a very important thing. And I think there are tools on most of the social that you can actually do that quite easily. But I'm just curious, like, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the different fora and how they differ and how you chose the ones that you did.
Okay, I have a blog, I have a Facebook account, I have a Twitter account. I actually do have a LinkedIn account, but I don't go there ever, so I don't know what's happening there. Your blog is, I would say, the most intimate and direct form of communication with your readers, because they are there only for you. They're not on Facebook and they see you. They are subscribers to your blog. They're for you there. Obviously, it's a great place to advertise your book. People like reading you, right? So that's a given, right? Facebook and Twitter-wise, I would say Facebook is a better platform for engaging in discussions and in intelligent discussions, in sharing information that is not specifically about the news, but actual, more in-depth analysis of different subjects. Facebook can offer that, and it can offer discussions, in the fields of comments that are not only, bashing each other with bludgeoning each other with words, but actually, engaging in conversation. And again, it has a whole other public audience than Twitter. Twitter is very much a communications, publications, news cycle public. Okay, so people who are in the media, business or consume news and politics and media. And unless you're, a social scientist writing about contemporary politics, it's not your public. I mean, I'm not saying not advertising Twitter. Obviously, I did, but Facebook is a whole other scene with people much more interested in general subjects, and as such, again, it's the better place to invest, I would say.
Got it. And do you, at this point, with so many, different people sort of following your Facebook feed, do you feel as if when you're writing, when you're in the middle of a post, do you feel like sort of your audience well enough to kind of gauge their reactions, or do sometimes you put up something you think is going to be quite neutral and innocuous and it turns into like World War III? Like how good of a grasp do you have over your own page and reaction? Yeah.
This is the magic of life. There are always surprises, right? I mean, I have a Facebook account for 10 years. As you said, I have over 30,000 followers, and I can usually assess what's going to happen and how to write things in order to get the proper reaction, not only to, antagonize or flatter my readers, but also to get some sort of engagement with deeper stuff. But then again, always, to both sides, there are surprises. Something that I think is just a banal observation of whatever, gets applause and huge shares, and something that I think is, again, something just trivial that I want to say, a critic or of something, and I'm for the next half hour or hour the enemy of the people or whatever, right? So that also happens.
Got it. So Dominique, I want to shift back to you for a minute and talk about from a publisher's perspective. How important is it to you that your authors are already engaged, on social media and through other platforms? And how much is that sort of, obviously, it doesn't come in place of, academic rigor and novelty of the book, but is that a factor that's taken under consideration when looking at authors? And if so, do you think that's like a trend in academic publishing in general that's going to be, continuing?
It's not a factor in the sense that we're looking at that in order to decide what are we going to publish or not. But we do see that it helps in your dissemination and how easy it is to reach an audience and to connect with a wider public. And that is something which is also really required more and more, especially for the humanities and social sciences. We see also that a lot of funders are really asking for this. It's sometimes more difficult to measure the impact of our works. It's really important. How do you connect with a wider audience, and what is your plan in that sense? And sometimes you also have to say something about that in a funding proposal. So that's a really important aspect, and I really agree with Tomer in that sense that it really helps if you don't do that in terms of, well, I've written something, here's my new article, go and read it, but that you already are engaged with an audience, that you're already active, you're already having discussions about what is your passion, what is the research that you publish, why did you choose that area of expertise, what made you enthusiastic about it, and that you're engaged in discussions around that. That way you're already part of the conversation, and we see that really helps in how successful you are later on.
Got it.
I mean, can I follow up on that? And I'd like to also answer, because it's connected, what Jamie asked in the chat. She asked, would you also recommend using my social media platforms to promote the works of others in my field? And I would say certainly yes, for 3 reasons. First of all, it's nice. Be a nice person, be a colleague and a friend, etc. Second of all, it also, again, goes back to striking that balance between self-service and something, and pro bono, let's say, if to be romantic about it, public service, right? We want to, and this I'm saying for strictly utilitarian, again, self-serving purposes. You don't want only to sell yourself. It looks bad and it sells bad, right? It doesn't work. You want to, say, look, there's an interesting book. I comment about it, ABC. I think it's nice. Maybe you should read it, etc. And so this is the second reason. It works, okay? And the third reason also, in a broader way, you need to position yourself not only as an expert of a single specific thing. Obviously you are. Obviously you've written a book about X, right? And not Y. But I think if you have the capacity to be, public intellectual is a big word, but something close to that, right? Something approaching that. It also enhances your public persona, your image. It also, it makes people understand this person is not only a specialist about this, they have something interesting to say about many things, and probably, if so, their book about X, right, about a specific thing, will teach me other things as well, even though they are specialized only in that, because they have a broad vision of things. They're taking in different considerations. So again, it's a good thing to present yourself as such.
Yeah, I want to talk, and maybe I'm going a little bit off script here, but I want to ask a little bit about the dark side. And what I mean by that is that just having this corpus of materials and quotes and ideas online, you know, probably involves some form of risk or involves some sort of bravery, because we've seen people who have, you know, written things either because they were written in haste and maybe didn't really think through them, or because they really were written, you know, in a way that was insensitive, or there's whenever we put words down on paper, you know, we're taking a sort of risk, but when we post them for the world, you know, I'm sure it creates sort of a history log of everything, you know, that we've thought. And I wonder if you've had, you know, like second thoughts about, you know, posting certain things as a result of that, or had experiences that you've learned from. So maybe Tomer, we'll start with you and then jump over to Dominique, maybe as a company, if there have been experiences where you're like, you know, have kind of rethought yourself.
Well, yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, there is a downside, there is a shadow side, let's say. And first of all, of course, it's what you said. There's always the you know, the chance that you'll say something wrong or something insensitive, and that you'll be, you know, you know, burned at the stake, at least for a certain amount of time. And you know, sometimes you're even banished for good, I guess. So yeah, there's that risk. You need to think about what you're writing, and you need to watch out. I mean, and I don't think it's too hard to understand, you know, what is taboo in every society, but yes, that's a risk. But I'll say another thing. There's another downside to that, and that is, if we are talking about academic publishing and academics, there is a certain suspicion on the side, maybe not of academic presses, but on the side of academic institutes, of people who are too publicly popular, right? I don't know how this is, you know, I hope we can acknowledge that. I have peers that would frown upon a person like myself that has a public persona, that is a sort of a public intellectual, right? As a sort of a person who, you know, who dilutes what they do, who is superficial. It's not, you know, doesn't engage in rigorous work, but writes, you know, op-eds in the paper. And these things are risky for academics before tenure. Obviously, after tenure, you can do whatever you want. Right? And yes, and I think, and I mean, I imagine I paid the price for this. I think I benefited more from the other sides of what I do, but this is something to be considered.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that's a like a perspective that I think maybe that's sort of the elephant in the room of certain academics who say, you know, who would think about considering opening up an account or writing intellectually, but wonder kind of how their peers, not only how are they going to be perceived by their audience, but how their peers going to respond to them. Yeah, interesting.
Sure.
Dominique, anything that Brill has kind of learned from being active in the social sphere about, you know, what that entails and you know, maybe what to avoid?
Yeah, of course, we've had sometimes critical discussions on social media as well. I think we all recognize that if you're on Twitter, then at some point there are critics that on Twitter. I think we always try to really engage in a conversation with people. And sometimes it can also be a platform where you can really directly explain something that people are wondering about, and then it can be really helpful. We've also seen cases where perhaps it helped us to shape new workflows around ethics principles, for example, where we saw we can really learn something here. Someone is critical and they're really helping us, and we've engaged with that person to really help us look at our own procedures and make that better. We've also seen cases sometimes where there are Twitter accounts that if you really dive deeper into them, you see that's really an account that is focused only on being critical of certain. So it's basically a trolling Twitter account, and that's something to be careful of. And I think if you keep feeding that, then that's not helpful at all. So then you have to let go at some point. But certainly that's an interesting area where you're always sort of trying to leverage being constructive and being able to learn from each other, and at the same time not to get lost in that.
Yeah, Yeah, for sure. Interesting. And are there specific, just out of curiosity, for authors that do publish with Brill, are there specific, tools or support that you offer? What sort of, ways do you help authors in an active way to, help them sort of get their research out there?
Of course, we do provide. Well, I've mentioned some of the areas in which
Yeah.
we do that via Kudos, but we also provide training. We talk to our editorial board, for example, about social media and how you can be effective in that sense. That's so there's a range of different platforms. This is also one way of doing it, being in a panel like this and trying to say something about how you can engage in that more effectively. So we really try to look at different platforms. We also have an offer portal where we list a lot of tips and tricks. We write white papers around this. So it's really a broad range of different things, and that way we're trying to really have a broad scope.
Great. And now, Tomer, I'm curious whether, when you're thinking about when things are happening in the world, and there are always things happening in the world, that there are I don't know, just thinking over the last few months, obviously the war in the Ukraine, thinking just yesterday the French election. These are important and significant events in the world. Do you feel a sort of pressure because you have this platform to kind of address everything? And I could see that being very overwhelming, or chime in. And how do you decide kind of what topics you want to engage with and which ones you might want to leave alone?
Okay, thanks. I mean, yeah, I do feel pressure, and it's a good opportunity to say that, just as I said before, that you should not only focus on your area of expertise, but try to engage with other subjects. Definitely should not engage with everything and comment about everything that happens. Obviously, that's a bad idea because you don't know everything, and there are many subjects, of course, that I'm not only am I not an expert in, but I just don't have any idea about, and it's always tempting to try to say something intelligent about them, and I always try to resist that temptation and really talk about things that I at least have some understanding in. So yes, there is the pressure to react, and I would say I would say I have two criteria for what I write about. One is understanding something about it. And the other is, I think, the question of integrity. And here it is more around the subjects of morals and politics, right? If something happens, I live in Israel, so if something happens in Israeli politics that I think, demands, requires a sort of some sort of moral stance, I would engage and try to say something about it, whether or not it is, serving my camp, my political camp. And this is, again, the question of integrity. I try to criticize my people when deserved, and obviously other people when deserved also. I think this also is a part of being a public intellectual, right? It's also commenting about current affairs, especially in questions of ethics, and yeah. So this is also what I do, even, and here sometimes even when I don't want to comment about it, because just it's something that is unfortunate. Like, it's something that is I don't feel comfortable about, because it's a negative thing about something that is close to my heart, but I sometimes force myself to say what I think, because it is included in the whole package of being of what my 30,000 followers expect me to engage in.
Your answer here is sort of like, it's probably back to a previous question, which you had discussed why maybe certain academics, hesitate or think twice before they actively become involved in social media. And I wonder if there's something, I'm going to try and look at them righteously for a few moments. And I wonder if there's something about the immediate response reaction, which is antithetical to the academic sort of take time to let things seep in and to, and to understand them and to see broader perspective. Maybe I'm thinking about it, maybe from a historian's perspective, where it's like in the moment is maybe a difficult time to really best understand what's going on. So I wonder how much that, and letting things sort of percolate in your mind. So I wonder how much that kind of maybe could be potentially a reason why academics don't necessarily want to, jump in right away on every topic.
Definitely so. I think that, letting things sink in, sleeping on it, etc., is always a good idea. And if you can delay your reaction, you should, right? Yeah. And writing just straight off the cuff is usually not a good idea. And I want to say also, following what I said before, what I described as reacting or commenting about ethical, moral, and political questions does not have to be part of your public persona. You can also be just an intellectual, right? Just a person that knows stuff about stuff, that has their area of expertise, and that also engages with other stuff, but doesn't comment about politics. This is, I think you don't lose a lot by being safe over there. I have my my public activity, but I don't think it's actually required for what we are talking about here, as in presenting a public persona that also later will help you reach out with your book.
Got it. Fantastic. All right, I want to be conscious of time here, but there's a few more questions that I think are really important and critical, and maybe we'll do a lightning round with just one sentence answers. I know that's difficult for all of us, but we'll try our best. But Dominique, before the lightning round, I do want to ask you if you have seen in your role, in marketing, if you've seen particularly successful academics who have done this really well, whether it's through a book launch or an event, or someone who really kind of understood what it was to galvanize their own audience and really get them excited about their project, and maybe to share so that academics that are with us today can kind of maybe glean some insight for their own work.
Yeah, I think one really nice example that we had was an academic that also had a following on social media, but he did research on how things are cluttering the environment, and how long it takes for things to disintegrate, like, for example, mouth masks, which are, of course, a new strain of waste these days. So he did research into that and wanted to make people more aware of that, and also share how important it is to realize that it takes a really long time for things to dissolve in the environment once they're out there. So of course, we promoted his article throughout all of our channels, and the university did as well, and he did on his own social media. But what he also did was think about, okay, so how can I really bring this message through a wider audience and through the broader public? And what he decided to do was he engaged with his students and decided to clean up the canals in Leiden. So every once in a while that he would just go through the canals and clean them up. And that really generated a lot of interest also from mainstream media that thought, hey, this is a really nice way of sharing how important this is and why it's important. And I think that was really a fun way that you sort of think about, okay, who am I trying to reach with my message, and how can I connect with that audience? And we saw that worked really well, that you had, on the one hand, our networks where we were sharing things, his own, the universities, but also through the way he did that, we connected with a much wider media audience.
Yeah, I don't want to become overly romantic here, but it's sort of like there's a theme here I'm sensing from, starting from Tomer through what you're saying, Dominique, is that there's like, if you have integrity and you actually practice what you preach, then maybe like good things will come out of that. Now, believe me, there's plenty wrong with social media. We could spend a whole session talking about all the problems, but I actually do think there's a certain amount of authenticity or genuineness that maybe we can all learn from, and that kind of even though it's only an online persona, and that's the word we've been using, can really come through if we're being genuine about the projects that it is that we're doing. All right, we're going to go quickly to the lightning round here, so no more than one sentence answers, but hopefully get some more good information before we let you go. So, Dominique, have you seen any success for authors via podcast interviews, such as the New Books Network?
Yeah, that's certainly something where we see that has thousands of listeners through podcast channels. So that really helps to engage that audience, but not only the podcast audience, but then also a wider audience of people who just see that on social media or just read about it. So it's even broader than just that podcast audience. Sorry, try to keep it short.
That's all right, no problem. All right, and Dominique, can you, or actually, Tomer, maybe have there been any examples of where something that you've written, or just maybe just your presence in general, has led to opportunities that maybe you think you wouldn't have? Because you talked about this trade-off, you might have been able to publish more articles, but can you give us some examples of some of the benefits that you've reaped from being there?
No doubt about it. When my last book was published in Hebrew, and now it was published not in an academic press, it was published in a wide public press, and they have their own publicity department, and they did a nice job. But most of the interviews I had was ones that I reached out to journalists and different blogs and podcasts, and I said, and because they knew my name, because of my public activity, they said, of course, yes, come over and we'll talk about this and this and this and this, and also about your book and what you. So definitely, I mean, I can't overstate how much the fact that I already had a public persona helped in getting the word out that I have a book and the book is out, etc. Yeah.
Great, Dominique. Other fora. Let's say there are social phobes here that don't want to be on social media. Other fora. You mentioned before listservs. I think that was really great, because I think that listservs are sort of something that us academics hold on to for dear life and are really powerful tools. But I'm just curious, other outlets that you can think of.
Yeah, of course, there's a really broad range of social media, and you can also decide that you're just active on academia and not on every social medium that is out there, or indeed just look at a listserv or the conference. I think you really have to find a medium that suits you, that where you can really connect with your audience. So it's much more important to find the right channel than to be on every channel.
Yeah, for sure. All right, and last but not least, Tomer, how many hours a week would you estimate that you dedicate to your social media? I know that's an unfair question that you might not want to. It's like asking your age, but
no. I wish I had an answer even for myself. It's a lot of hours. I think honestly that I can cut back. I don't need all of them, but it does take time. It certainly takes time. Writing a good Facebook post is sometimes an hour, sometimes a few hours. Writing a blog post is even more. Twitter is something else, but then again, I think the effect is also different. So I don't know. It's quite a few hours a week. Yeah.
Got it. Brilliant. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of the lightning round. So thank you again, Dominique and Tomer. We've got a few questions here. Before we get to the questions, Alana's going to put up on the screen just in the information, just contact info. If you have more questions for Dominique or for Tomer or for myself, please don't hesitate. You can be in touch with any of us individually, and just with any follow-up that you may have, definitely feel free to check out all of our social medias. That we're all active on social media, so you can check us out there. Send us a reach out on LinkedIn. That's fine as well. And happy to be in touch and to speak. So let's get to some of the questions here. All right, so let's start with, it looks like there's just a handful, so we should be able to knock these through quite quickly. McGill asks, I don't know who McGill is, but so is it primarily the author's responsibility to promote their work to a wider audience, or is it the publisher's job? And he or she is asking, as a published academic author, received very little support in terms of marketing their book. Yeah, Dominique?
Yeah, I see it really as a publisher's task, of course, that we have a role in the marketing and selling of each title, and making sure that that we talk about the research we publish, and that everyone is aware of that. And I talked about a wide range of ways that we do that, via emails, via newsletters, through our own database, through our own social media, our own website and blog and podcast. But at the same time, we also see that it really helps if an author is also active, and that you also engage your own network. I think the two can really strengthen each other. So of course you can rely, I think you should be able to rely on the publisher to do the marketing for your title, and we have ways in which we do that. But it can really strengthen the distribution and promotion of your work if you also engage your own network.
Yeah, and I think what I've seen the most success in is when authors can kind of bring to the table, even already in their prospectus, in their proposal, say, here's where I'm active, here's where I know people, here's my audience, right, that I interact with anyways, right? We talked about building a new audience, but even if you just take 5-10 minutes to just start jotting down, here are the people or the institutions or the individuals that I engage with on a regular basis. What are their circles, right? And do I feel comfortable enough asking them to share with their colleagues? And if it's something that's interesting, someone once asked me, well, what's the difference between an email that you send out that's spam and an email that you send out that's not spam? And I say, how much people care, how valuable the content is, right? What's spamming is when you're sending out things that people say, I don't want this. No, but when you're sending out something that obviously people opt into and then care about, so that's what turns you from being an annoyance into actually someone who's contributing. So I definitely think that that's the place to start, is just to kind of like think about your circles both virtually and personally, and kind of expand from there. And as Dominique said, if you can actually like make it clear to the publisher where your influence can be, that makes their job much easier to then go ahead and sell your book to that audience.
Yeah, I think the key thing is also that what is your message? And it shouldn't be, hey, I just have a new book out, go and buy my book. The interesting part is, why is your research interesting? What is your research about? What made you enthusiastic about it? And that's what's its impact? So talk about what got you excited in your research data. And that is interesting for your peers as well. They want to hear about what you found out. That's what we all want to hear about. So talk about what did you find out and what were your results, rather than here's my new book.
Brilliant. Shani asked, we're looking to find someone or a company to translate academic work into plain language for practitioners. Has anyone worked with anyone like this? Shani, I apologize for the the shameless self-promotion, but this is something that we offer, and happy to chat with you afterwards and set a time to discuss. So yeah, and I'll take this opportunity to say that if anyone wants any help with any of our services, Alana just threw a link into the chat. So again, it's really any language or publication support services. We actually, I omitted this, but this is actually quite exciting and important. Recently, I've come to a strategic partnership with Brill, so we're going to be doing a lot of work with Brill in the coming months. So you'll be seeing posts on socials and other networks about sort of some of the things that we're going to be doing together, and we're very excited about sort of seeing where that's going to take us. Really, currently the for those who aren't familiar, the field of academic support is known as author services, and we really want to think about how do we do a better job of helping empower authors and give them the tools to succeed in publishing, because publishing seems to get harder and harder as the years go by, especially with just with globalization and all of the different and the amount of really great work that's coming out of all sorts of different places. It becomes harder and harder to publish. So we're here to help you in any way, and you can feel free to check out our services by clicking on the link in the chat. So we'll finish off with that. Dominique, Tomer, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate you joining us. It was really insightful. I think that your perspectives were very much complementary and different, but complementary and helpful in that way. And much like posting itself, you kind of never know where things are going to lead you. So be brave, put something out there, and don't check it. Don't check it every 2 minutes, but check in, a couple times a day, see what happens, and let us know how it's going, and kind of take it from there. So thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.